Since we got everything removed, let's start putting the new parts in. So I'm going to start with the stabilizer link, because if I just popped in the lower control arm right now, then the control arm would be in the way of tightening the stabilizer link. Of course you can do it. I'm not saying you can't. I'm just saying it's just way easier to tighten this stabilizer link with the control arm out of the way. Now we could install our lower control arm. I have it right here. One thing I want to point out is that I am going to go ahead and torque down the bolts the second I put this control arm in. In my opinion, there's no reason to wait to load the suspension to torque these down, because these bushings go in the car like this. Let's just call them vertical bushings, okay? So the bolt would come from the bottom going up, and the way these move on the car, it doesn't matter if the suspension is loaded or not. Same thing for this one over here. Now if these bushings were sideways like this, to the point where the bolt would come in from the side, let's just call it a horizontal bushing, these would naturally pivot as the suspension goes up and down like that. Those are the type of bushings that you don't want to torque down until the suspension is loaded. Fight me, you could say I'm wrong, you can leave the comment below. I'm just trying to use a little bit of logic here of which way these bushings rotate and pivot, as far as if you could torque them down right now versus with the suspension loaded. So let's go ahead and install this. And look how easy that fell into place. This is exactly what I'm talking about. I kind of love doing jobs like this where everything comes apart, because everything just falls right into place. You're not fighting against anything else. Let's go ahead, pop the bolts in, and like I said, I am going to torque them down right now. Alright, so I got the knuckle in the vise right here. Everything is cleaned up where the new wheel bearing is going to go, and I'm going to use my favorite CRC corrosion protection to protect from rust. You can use whatever item you like to use to protect from rust. Now one thing I will say is, when you're putting in the wheel bearing, you have to check where the sensor is going to go right here on the side, and make sure it lines up with the little window that's on the new wheel bearing. Because when I did the other side, I found out the hard way after I had reassembled 99% of the car that the hole for the ABS sensor didn't really line up with the small window that's on the wheel bearing. So instead of taking everything back apart, I came from the back side and I was hitting the little cage, because it's just a cage that gets pressed on and it can rotate on a wheel bearing. But here I was using a punch and a hammer to try to get that cage to rotate just enough to fit the sensor through, instead of taking everything back apart again. So the simple solution is, make sure that little window lines up with the ABS sensor hole before you torque everything down, because it's much easier to make your adjustments right now rather than having everything put back together and it's on the car, if that makes any sense. Do not forget about the splash shield, and make sure you got it on facing the correct way. So that's going to sit there like that. Let me go get the brand new wheel bearing. So here was that cage I was talking about. You can see it just pressed onto the wheel bearing, and it can rotate, but it's on there pretty solid. It's hard to get it to rotate. And there goes the window I was talking about for the ABS sensor. So from the factory, they press it on to what they think is the correct spot. And who knows, this one may line up perfectly, but I know the front right side didn't line up perfectly. It was pretty close, but not enough to get the sensor, and it was hitting. So I had to probably move it over, I don't know, less than a quarter inch. So I guess that's a pretty big ways off. You can see there's a window right there for the ABS sensor, and then there's another one on this side. It's kind of hard to mess it up, but I guess it is possible to put the wheel bearing in upside down, where neither of these windows would be where the ABS sensor hole is, and then at that point you really do have to take it back off again. So let's see, the windows for this thing up here, so I want to put this thing like this. Alright, and at this point I'm going to look in through the window where the ABS sensor hole goes, and I want to make sure everything lines up, the sensor is going to fit. Let me show you guys. Alright, so first of all, I have the bolts in the wheel bearing. They're not torqued down, but they're just in place to align the wheel bearing to where it normally would sit. And if we look inside that hole, I got a light back here so you guys can see. Do you see the square edges of the cage of where the sensor is supposed to go into the hole? The fact that I could even see the edges of that hole means that that thing is not properly aligned. The sensor is not going to fit when you try to install it on the car, and you're going to have one heck of a time trying to deal with this once everything is reassembled. So the solution here is to take this wheel bearing off and to move that cage maybe I don't know, just a few millimeters to the left until we have a straight shot. The sensor is going to go straight all the way down without hitting that little steel cage. Alright, so here's a after shot of moving that cage over. You can see we no longer see the square edge of that cage. At this point, the sensor is going to go in perfectly and fit just fine. I'll take the wheel bearing off to show you guys how much I had to move it over. Alright, so hopefully this is picking up. Before I move the cage over, I use a red marker to mark both of them, make sure there was a straight line going across. And you can see how much I shifted this cage over. I don't know what's that, maybe like 2 millimeters. That's all it took, and now the sensor is going to fit. And this is exactly what I found when I was doing the wheel bearing on the front right side. I only had to move this cage about the same amount, really. So I don't know, maybe it's just a manufacturing defect that the thing isn't in the exact spot it's supposed to be, but it's not that far off, so it's not a huge deal. But I bet this thing has bitten a few people in the butt when it comes down to putting the sensor in. They think, oh, I'm done with this job, all I gotta do is pop this sensor in and boom, it's out of here. And then they run into this trouble. So something to catch before you go any further. So I almost forgot to put CRC on the actual backing plate to protect it from corrosion. Just really right where it mates up against the wheel bearing. We do the same thing on this side. Alright, so it's time to put the knuckle on, but before we do that, let's go ahead and grease up the splines right here. I'm just using regular old wheel bearing grease. We just need something to basically lubricate and protect from corrosion. So I'd say almost any type of grease would be fine here. Alright, let's go ahead and put the knuckle on. I'm going to put it kind of like backwards, just so we have easy access to the bolt. And right there, slid in perfect. We'll grab the bolts. If I remember correctly, it came in from this side. As you can see, the bolt is in. I just gave it a few love taps to send it home. We'll go ahead and put the nut on it, and let me torque this down right now. So I'm going to go ahead and spray the 4 bolt heads as well as this thing right here, which is basically the ball joint. Spray all of that with CRC to protect it from corrosion in the future, because if you've ever tried to put a socket on a bolt that is completely rotted away, you would know that sucks. So this is a little bit of extra protection so that years from now, or at least the next time someone comes in here, which is going to be me, the bolt is still the original size that it was intended to be. Alright, so we'll take the hook out of here. That lower ball joint feels way stiffer than the old one. There we go. It slid in perfectly, nice and smooth, no hammering, and that's the result of cleaning off the corrosion and putting the grease on there, and also the fact that we got a brand new wheel bearing, so that helps. So the outer tie rods are directional, just like the stabilizer links, so you got to make sure you put the correct one on. This is the one for the left side of the car. And I don't know if I mentioned this, but all I did was break the jam nut free, and it actually moved with the entire inner tie rod. So that means this thing's gonna fall right back into its original place. I'm not saying the alignment's gonna be spot on, but it's honestly the closest it's gonna be. And when it goes to the alignment shop, they could deal with this and make sure the alignment comes out nicely. So let me grab a wrench and I'll snug up the jam nut, and that'll be it for this outer tie rod. The spring is not compressed yet, so you don't want to fully remove this nut. I just want to get it to the very end of the threads while there's still tension on the shaft. That looks pretty good right there. Now it should be safe to remove the nut, and I use the word safe in a very loose term. So, oh no, we're good. We are good. Don't you worry about that. I knew that. I was just messing with you guys. So I moved the top hat, strut mount, strut bearing, whatever you want to call it. I flipped it over, and this is perfect example of why you want to replace these things. If you're not going to replace it, at least take it apart, clean it, and re-grease the bearing inside of here. But listen to this. So here goes the new bearing. Not only does it sound better, but I also don't feel any grit when I'm rotating it. It just feels nice and smooth. Let's go ahead and push in the shaft on the strut, see what it feels like. And there's some resistance, so that's a good sign. It's not completely blown out. And as you can see, it is returning. That's good. It's moving very slowly. And it's just about stopped. So of course it's not fully returning all the way to the top. And it's just an old tired strut assembly with 150,000 miles on it. The fact that it even still has pressure in it after 150K it's impressive to me. So it's not horrible, but definitely the car can benefit from a new set of struts. And there we have it. It's all complete, ready to go back on the car. It was a real pain in the butt to compress the spring, but the first one was just the same. Anyway, it got done. Alright, let's go ahead and put the knuckle into the strut. I'm just going to use a pry bar to help get leverage on the lower control arm. Once it gets past these little tabs right here, it really helps everything fall into alignment. That's actually a really nice design. Oh, you know what? I forgot to show you guys. Let's check the ABS sensor, see if it goes in. Sensor's right here. So if I did everything correctly, the sensor should just drop right in. Look at that. Perfect. Did you ever doubt me? See, this is the point where actually I got further than this last time because I had all the brakes on it and everything, and tie rod was connected. And then that's when I realized, because I was trying to do the ABS sensor at the very end, that's when I realized that the wheel bearing wasn't lining up with where the sensor belongs. So that sucked. Alright guys, honestly I don't know if I need to show you guys anymore because everything else is just you know, all I have to do is put the brakes on it, connect the outer tie rod and the stabilizer link, and that's it. Of course, torque everything down, right? So I'm not gonna waste any more of your time, guys. Let me put all this stuff back together and I'll get you guys a finished shot of this thing. So I'm just about done here, well, at least for the front left side. Everything up here is torqued down, looks real good. Axle nut torqued down, brand new cotter pin, caliper mounted and torqued, retainer clip installed. Both of these are torqued down. The ABS sensor is back where it belongs. Stabilizer link torqued down, outer tie rod torqued down, as well as a brand new cotter pin, and the jam nut for the tie rod is also torqued down. So this thing's good to go, like the new chicken fajita from Taco Bell. Not a sponsor. Anyway, like I said, it's about 10 p.m. I'm tired, so I'm not going to be taking it out for a test drive tonight. In fact, I think tomorrow morning I'll just come out here and knock out the parts I'm missing on the front right side. It's the next day, and here's a short update. As you can see, I got the stabilizer link and the strut mount off. Here goes the front right side, and this thing's good to go. That's the new part on top. All right, and the new stabilizer link is already installed on this end. All right, so let's go out for that test drive. So I'm out in the Nissan taking it for a test drive. Yes, one of the tires needs air in it. It has a constant leak, so we got to get that. Well, actually, like I said, it's getting new tires, so that's going to get addressed anyway. But I've been test driving the car, and pretty good, guys. No noise, no nothing, and the steering wheel is relatively straight for going straight down the road. I'm pretty happy with it, and if I let go of the steering wheel, look, it's not pulling like real hard or anything. It's fine, honestly, for changing as many parts as we did, and the car drives relatively straight even letting go of the steering wheel. That's pretty good. Of course, it still has to go in for a wheel alignment, but I'm just saying it's pretty spot on for what it is. So that back there was a bumpy road, and I'm noticing how much quieter the front end is. It doesn't feel like the struts are just rattling around. And to be honest, it was never like horrible. I've been in cars that were way worse, but there was definitely a noise going over bumps, and to me that seems to be gone. I'm not really hearing it anymore. And right now I'm doing about 45 on a nice smooth road. No wheel bearing noise. Sounds nice and quiet inside of here, just how it should. Sounds normal to me. So everything's looking really good, guys. You can see the airbag light is on. That light has been on for like 4 or 5 years already, and I keep saying I'm gonna get to it, and who knows, maybe I will get to it one day. But that's gonna be it for the Altima front end suspension and steering components. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and like always, thanks for watching.